Hello, everyone, and welcome to another chapter of Murder in Stratton County, written by Elizabeth Spoon and Rylan Mason, narrated by me, Brian Shepard. Chapter 6, The Weather Shifts, Part 1. As dawn broke, a steady chill had settled over the county. The cold mountain air moving over the pass and dropping down into the valley, causing a moist cloud of fog to form. Diago lifted his head from his printer and looked at the time. It was 2:30 a.m. As he was looking at the time, he could see the reflection of headlights streak over the wall. He quickly got up and opened the office door, watching Deputy Marks's cruiser go by. The coroner's van shortly behind him, finally followed by the sheriff, all heading towards the station. A few minutes later, the state police and the CSI van, all quietly trying to reach one destination. Diago's eyes went wide. Whoa, did something big just happen? He looked at the printer. It was almost done printing the next edition of today's paper. Diago knew that he had to get the story. Maybe this was tied to the mayor's arson. He quickly pulled on his coat and hat, reaching for his inside pocket to make sure that he had his notebook and a pen. Grabbing a small camera from the shelf he sometimes used to take front-page photos. He listened to the printer make its last swipe, and the room went quiet. He quickly folded the papers and stuffed them in his satchel, slinging it over his head. He looked up at the clock again, deciding if he had time to see what was happening. Diago slipped out the back door and onto his pedal bike he had stashed, jumping on as he headed for the station. It was only a couple of blocks. As he pedaled the 3 or 4 blocks, the sidewalk was bumpy and dimly lit. The police station had come into view, and he slowed to a stop. There was a bustle of activity, and they were just unloading the van. Diago cautiously got off his bike and leaned it against the lamppost. Walking slowly up the sidewalk, he grabbed his camera and snapped a few shots of what was going on. He then clicked on a flashlight and reached into his bag, pulling out a copy of the paper. At that moment, Deputy Marks came walking around the side of the vehicle and noticed him. He looked at Diago and started heading in his direction. "Hello, Deputy. What's going on?" "I don't think you should be here right now, kid." "What happened? Is everything okay? Did someone get hurt?" "Diago!" The deputy silenced his pleas for information. "I can't tell you anything right now. Maybe when we know more, the sheriff will contact you or give a statement. For now, there's nothing to see here." Diago, at that moment, peered over Deputy Marks's shoulder, just in time to see them unloading the body bag of someone. His eyes swelled a little bigger. "Oh my God! Someone's dead?" Sounding shocked. "Be on your way, Diago, please. I'm sure what happened will come to light soon." Diago, deterred but not willing to give up, walked back to his bike and began feverishly thinking of headlines and what could possibly be going on. A body bag? Someone dead? Why so late? Why the state police? This must be big, he thought to himself. He booked it back down the sidewalk to deliver his still sleeping readers the latest edition of the news, all while his mind was a flurry of what tomorrow's readers would think. Maybe he would have to put out an evening edition of the paper. Diago rode past the market, braking quickly and balancing his bike between his legs as he pulled out Alice's bundles of paper out of his satchel and placed them in front of the door. He quickly then dismounted and, leaning his bike against the edge of the building, ran across the street with the morning copies for Mrs. Brentley. He had a few more stops and then he could head back to his paper office. He headed again down the sidewalk, checking the quiet intersection as he cut across the street and up to a row of houses on a cul-de-sac that were on his delivery route. He continued to throw papers onto various porches until there were no more papers. Most farther houses would just buy a copy in town, or borrow one left on a park bench to read quickly and then toss away. He paused for a minute in the chilly early morning air, looking over at one of the houses. Through the puffs of smoke coming from the wood stoves and a moisture-laden fog still rolling over the trees and housetops, he could see the third story of a house on the adjacent street. It was the third-floor window of the Victor place. Diego remembered his mom's words when he asked about that house. It had been vacant for some time and for sale. It was rumored to be haunted. Strangely, there was a light on in the room. He looked again as a cloud of misty fog moved past, obscuring the view. The light was gone. Diego froze for a second. Did he just see a light, or was he just tired? He shook it off, and quickened his pace, went to retrieve his bike from the front of the market, and headed back to his office. All the while, his mind was swirling with questions about what was really going on. Diego entered through the back door of the pizza place, being sure to be quiet. He could hear the television still on from the apartment upstairs. He walked up the stairs and entered the apartment, closing the door behind him. His mom, Maria, had her feet up and was asleep in the recliner. She stirred a bit, and he kissed her on the forehead and whispered, "It's just me, Mom." She pulled the blanket to her chin and went back to sleep. Diego stood watching the television for a few minutes, the weather updates scrolling across the bottom of the screen. He noted that he had to check the wire reports for the next edition of the paper. He then quickly opened the fridge in the kitchen, grabbing a snack, and then retreated down the back stairs that led to the alley and to the back door of his office. Letting himself in, he sat at his computer, clicking away at different stories coming in from all over the county and beyond, his pen scribbling notes as he went. He looked up at the clock. It was 4:15. He knew he had to get writing, but his eyes were already heavy. He slipped off his sneakers under the desk and stood up stretching. "A few minutes of shut-eye and I'll be good," he said to himself. He curled up onto the couch, listening to the wind pick up outside slightly and beginning to howl. The weather was moving in, he thought. Within minutes, he was asleep. His last thoughts collide into a swirl of words in his dreams. As the sun began to rise, there was a cold front starting to move in over the town. Frigid air coming down from the mountain passes, the wind picking up here and there, blowing the last of the loose leaves from their grip on tree branches and swirling them from their not yet frozen positions on the ground into neighboring yards and onto sidewalks. The town was again a bustle, people emerging in hats and scarves, shivering to unseasonal weather that was moving in. Alice and Shep were already knee-deep in customers and breakfast orders, while locals and still their out-of-towners sat and read the paper and conversed over their cups of coffee and orange juice. The chimes on the door rang, and Alice looked out from the kitchen. It was the mayor. He looked around at all the tables, spying an empty one towards the back. He gestured to her, and she immediately nodded her head. Brian made his way to the table, sitting and looking at the headline on the front of the paper. It read, "Still no answers in arson fire at Shepherd Mansion." Below that, "Reports pending. Mayor exclusive interview." He chuckled to himself. This kid has a knack for writing. He looked up as Alice approached the table with a cup and the coffee pot in her hands. "Coffee?" Alice asked. "Yes, please, Alice," Brian said, glancing up from the paper. "Any breakfast today, sir?" she asked. "I'm just waiting for the sheriff." He looked down at his watch. It was 10 of 7 in the morning. Brian sat wondering what new developments had come over the few morning hours that had passed. He poured some cream into his coffee and tapped his keys, still in his hands on the table, wanting answers. Oh, the mess in my cabin, he thought. He remembered looking at it as he left for the morning. Still remnants of sheetrock lying about. Are you okay? Alice looked at him. You look, befuddled. No, I'm fine, Brian assured her. Just then, his cell phone began to ring in his pocket. Alice poured more coffee and headed to the front, where the unusual couple staying in town were waiting to pay their check again. The chimes dinged as Alice stepped behind the counter. Oh, hi, Sheriff. Hey, Alice. Alice turned her attention to the couple as the sheriff looked them over, gave a friendly tip of his hat, and headed for where Brian was just finishing his coffee. Morning, Dugan, Brian said, looking up from his coffee. We need to go. Dugan leaned in close, not to say it too loud. Brian just looked at him. Right now? Your office or mine? Brian asked, looking worried. Doesn't matter, Diago replied. Okay. Brian gulped the last sip of his coffee and pushed out his chair to leave. Meanwhile, up front, Alice rang out the credit card, looking at the name again. Thank you so much, Alice handed him back the card. The door again opened to the market as the couple exited out onto the sidewalk. Another person came walking in. She turned quickly, looking at the couple who were heading across the street to the inn. Hi there, Alice looked up from the receipt she was still holding. For Mr. Scarsborough. Not seeing the look she had given the man and his companion as they left the store. Hi, I'm Gemma Mint Realty Company, she said with a huge smile. Her business card tucked between two fingers. Two very polished, painted fingernails at the ends. Alice took it. Nice to meet you. Feel free to look around. Alice stepped from behind the counter. I'm looking for the Benson family, she smiled at Alice. I was told I could find them here. Alice looked down at the card. Hi, I'm Alice. I believe they're still at the dining table. She pointed to the woman towards the back. I hear the kids. Thanks. Turning towards the voices of the children, she quickly started to head for the dining area. Alice paused for a moment, taking in what she was wearing, and looked back down at the card in her hand. It had pink roses on it. It read Miss Gemma Mint, Realtor, Notary Services. On the back was a phone number and email. Dugan and Brian were just approaching the counter. Alice, we have to leave. I left the cash on the table, Dugan said as they walked past her towards the door. Thanks, Alice said with a wave. Dugan opened the door and Brian stepped out onto the sidewalk. The wind was picking up again, a brief gust blowing leaves across the sidewalk into a corner. They stood there on the sidewalk for a minute, Brian fishing for his cigarillos and a lighter. The sheriff zipped up his coat, Alice watching them through the window for a minute, then went back to clear tables and to talk to Shep. Brian stood on the sidewalk, lighting a cigarillo. Think we got some weather coming in, Dugan. Taking a drag or two to keep it lit. Yeah, it feels like it, Dugan said, looking towards the mountain. Brian stared down the sidewalk for a minute. He saw Maria Hernandez standing outside her storefront with a tall, athletic-looking man. They were talking, and she was pointing to the top of the adjacent building that was still for sale or lease. I wonder who that is, Brian asked himself as he watched them move towards the building. Maria pulled a key from her apron, and the door opening, them both disappearing behind it. Oh, maybe a prospective buyer. Brian mentally took notice of the man's stature. He had jet black hair, short and parted to one side. He looked very athletic, tall, had to be at least 6'1" to his 5'11". Before he could ponder any more on the attributes of this newcomer to town, Dugan tugged him on the arm a little. "Hey, are you in dreamland still? We should go," he said. Brian turned and looked at Dugan with sort of a half smile. "No, I'm not in dreamland," putting on a pouting face. Dugan smiled back, knowing he had noticed, and was admiring the man while fishing for his smoke. Meanwhile, Alice had already cleared the table and was notably watching the interaction between the Benson family, Shep, and Miss Mint. "Come over here, Alice," Shep boomed. Tabitha Benson was pulling the coat onto her third youngest child, him still fisting a chunk full of dry pancake in his hand. Alice moved towards the table as she watched the sheriff and Brian's car drive past the windows, heading towards the town center. Shep, towel slung over his shoulder as always, had this big smile on his face. "Alice, this is Gemma Mint," he beamed. "Yes, we have met." She knew what he was thinking. Harry, Tabitha's husband, turned to Shep. "How about that check?" Harry asked. "Oh, right." He fished inside his apron for a minute. "It must be in the kitchen. Be right back." He disappeared into the kitchen to find it. "So," Alice said, as she was pulling plates from the table, "you're a realtor." "Yes, I drove all the way in just for today. I'm taking this lovely couple to view the Victor place." Shep emerged from the kitchen. Got it right here." Alice had to smile. He was such a clown sometimes. Alice cleared the table and walked back into the kitchen as Shep turned on his charm to the realtor and cashed out the check for the Bensons. "Have a great day," Shep waved as they exited onto the sidewalk, crossing the street. The realtor talking away to Tabitha and Harry as they moved towards their minivan to pile in their 3 children. Shep leaned in the doorway of the kitchen. Alice was washing dishes. "She's hot." Alice just turned around and looked at him. "Who?" She smiled. "That realtor. Tall, blonde, classy, and dishy." He licked his lips a little. "How would Rhonda feel about that?" Alice peering over her shoulder at him. "What? You know we're dating?" Alice turned and just looked at him. "Shep, everyone does. Your big secret ain't no secret." She laughed. "You want to get your head out of your pants and help me with the rest of this stuff?" Okay, Shep said. Shep grabbed the other 2 checks still pending on the turn wheel and went to drop them off at the tables of the other guests still in the dining area. It was business as usual for most of the morning for them. Meanwhile, down at the police station, the morning had taken a very grim turn. Other events were about to unfold, rocking this otherwise quaint little town to its core. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Chapter 6. I apologize for the lateness of this chapter. I am going through a roller coaster of a life-changing event, so I apologize, but I'm here and I'm reading it for you. So Chapter 6, we got some people coming in. Our usual suspects are still here. We have some mystery guy that Brian just noticed in town talking to Maria. I wonder who that is. We have Gemma Mint, the realtor, that's just entered. I wonder what she's up to. And just, things happened prior in the morning. So Diego knows that something's going on. But what is really going on, right? We all want to know. Well, there's only one way to find out, and that's to continue listening to me as I continue reading Chapter 6, Part 1. You know what? I apologize. I just read Part 1, so now I'm just going to continue talking on. So now we're not going to know until I read Part 2. Oh, I'm so sorry to have to do that to you. So, obviously, we know that there's a body that was unloaded from the van. Diego knows that there's something going on. We're going to find out. And, of course, the bad thing is that we already know who it is. It's Prudence, right? So, spoiler alert. Sorry, folks. But anyways, Brian doesn't know. So, that's in Part 2. Oh, my God. I'm going to have to read Part 2 right after this. But it's very long. Other than that, I hope you guys are enjoying these chapters that I'm reading. Murder in Stratton County is technically 17 chapters. It is a book. It was meant for print only. We recently decided to bring it to podcast because there's so many characters that come in and out of the book that I thought that by reading it, maybe with people listening to it, it would be easier for them to kind of keep track of the characters in the book. So that's how I decided to start reading it. I've already finished my first short story, which was Fear on the High Seas, written by Ryland Mason, which is on Amazon, by the way. You can buy print or Kindle. I'm currently working on book 1 of my adventure series, which is called Jack Jameson. So that's my new character. He is an archaeologist and avid adventurer, and we're just going to go all over the world, and he's in search of something. I won't tell you everything, but I've already started writing that one and reading it. So chapters 1 and 2 are there, and it's a podcast. So Jack Jameson is the name of the podcast. All of my books and all of my readings are available on all media platforms. So no excuse that you can't listen to anything. If you want to learn about Jack Jameson, your best bet is to read Fear on the High Seas, because I introduced Jack at the end of that book in a kind of interesting way. Or you can just go back and listen to the podcast. It's still there. I think I'm going to re-listen to it myself. Anyways, all right. So don't forget to follow me on Instagram, author r.mason. I follow everyone back. I'm also on Facebook. You can just type in author Ryland Mason. You can also go to the website, rylandmason.com. And that's RYLAN. No D. MASON. So there you go. Thanks for listening to part 1. I will do part 2 fairly soon. And we'll go from there. All right, everyone. That is it. And have a good night.